Noor was a high school sophomore in Baghdad when U.S. forces first attacked Iraq on March 19, 2003. At age 13, she had seen her country's leader, Saddam Hussein, condemn U.S. President George W. Bush on TV for threatening war, and had heard her family talking around the dinner table about a possible American invasion. Noor was a typical teenager. She loved Britney Spears and the Backstreet Boys and Christina Aguilera. She would watch Oprah and Dr. Phil in her free time, and one of her favorite films was The Matrix. She couldn't imagine U.S. soldiers in Baghdad, where life, though sometimes hard, had mainly been about hanging out with friends, walking to the park, and visiting her favorite animals at the zoo. To her, it just felt unreal. But 2 weeks later, American soldiers arrived in her part of the city. The first sounds she heard were airplanes and then explosions late in the afternoon. She rushed up to the roof of their house, following her mother and sisters, not knowing what they would find. When she looked up at the sky, she saw armored vehicles floating under parachutes. It was like a movie, she said. A few days later, American soldiers walked down the street in front of her house, and Noor ran to the front door to watch them. She saw her neighbors also standing in their doorways, smiles on their faces. The soldiers smiled back, eager to talk to anyone who was willing. Everybody was so happy, Noor recalled. There was suddenly freedom. Less than a week later, on April 9th, her fellow Iraqis descended on Firdos Square in central Baghdad, where they threw a rope over the enormous statue of Saddam Hussein, and with the help of American soldiers, tore it down. Noor thought to herself, we can have a new life, a better life. Life under Saddam had been challenging. Noor's father had been a government employee, yet, like many other Iraqis, the family had little money. Saddam's failed war against Iran in the 1980s had left Iraq poor and in debt, and things had gotten only worse in 1990 after he invaded Kuwait and economic sanctions were imposed. Noor's family, like most Iraqi families, struggled with rampant inflation, a crumbling healthcare system, and shortages of food and medicine. They also lived in fear. Iraqis were forbidden to talk politics or to criticize their government. They came to believe that the walls had ears, and that Saddam's security services were constantly watching. Saddam had been brutal to his enemies and rivals during his 24-year reign. Iraqis who criticized the president, his entourage, or his Ba'ath Party could be put to death. Journalists were executed or forced into exile. Some dissidents were imprisoned. Others simply disappeared. People heard stories of how prisoners were tortured, their eyes gouged out, their genitals electrocuted, then killed via hanging, decapitation, or by firing squad. But now the Americans had come, and 8 months after Iraqi citizens dragged Saddam's statue to the ground, U.S. soldiers found the fearsome dictator hiding in an 8-foot-deep hole near his hometown of Tikrit. He looked dirty and dazed. With Americans in charge, most Iraqis believed that their country would be reborn, and that they would experience the freedom and opportunities available in Western countries. Families dreamed of experiencing true democracy. The military, and perhaps the judiciary, would be reformed. Corruption would end. Wealth, including oil profits, would be distributed more equally. Noor and her family were excited for independent newspapers and satellite TV. "We thought we would breathe freedom. We would become like Europe," said Najm al-Jabouri, a former general in Saddam's army. They were wrong. When Saddam Hussein was captured, researchers who studied democratization didn't celebrate. We knew that democratization, especially rapid democratization in a deeply divided country, could be highly destabilizing. In fact, the more radical and rapid the change, the more destabilizing it was likely to be. The United States and the United Kingdom thought they were delivering freedom to a welcoming population. Instead, they were about to deliver the perfect conditions for civil war. Iraq was a country plagued by political rivalries, both ethnic and religious. The Kurds, a large ethnic minority in the north, had long fought Saddam for autonomy. They wanted to be left alone to rule themselves. The Shia, who made up more than 60% of Iraq's population, resented being ruled by Saddam Hussein, a Sunni, and his mostly Sunni Ba'ath Party. Over decades, Saddam had been able to consolidate power for his minority group by stacking government positions with Sunnis, requiring everyone to join the Ba'ath Party to qualify for jobs regardless of religion or sect, and by unleashing his murderous security forces on everyone else. A mere 2.5 months after the invasion, Iraqis coalesced into competing sectarian factions, dictated in part by 2 fateful decisions by the U.S. government. In an effort to bring rapid democracy to the country, Paul Bremer, the head of the United States transitional government in Iraq, outlawed the Ba'ath Party and ordered that all members of Saddam Hussein's government, almost all of whom were Sunni, be permanently removed from power. He then disbanded the Iraqi military, sending hundreds of thousands of Sunni soldiers home. Suddenly, before a new government could be formed, tens of thousands of Ba'ath bureaucrats were thrown out of power. More than 350,000 officers and soldiers in the Iraqi military no longer had an income. More than 85,000 regular Iraqis, including school teachers, who had joined the Ba'ath Party as a condition of their employment, lost their jobs. Noor, who is Sunni, remembers the feeling of shock around the country. Those who had been locked out of power under Saddam, however, saw their opportunity. Political jostling broke out almost immediately among figures such as Nouri al-Maliki, a Shia dissident who had returned from exile, and Muqtada al-Sadr, a radical Shia cleric who wanted Iraq to become an Islamic regime. Though the Americans had hoped to broker a power-sharing agreement among Sunnis, Shiites, and Kurds, they soon acquiesced to the demands of Maliki, who wanted a government that, like the population, was majority Shia. For Noor, what resulted wasn't democracy. It was chaos followed by a power grab.